Hi guys, Pink here. This is episode 6 of Hardercore with kOS, and we are still trying to get that heat shield. I ran a couple KSP buggy missions and got enough science to get the first node in tier 4, the basic science, which gives the goo experiments, and I'm sitting here now at about 35, so I only need about 10 more. So what I'm going to do this episode, at first, we're going to run an atmospheric science launch to get the goo from the low altitude or low atmosphere, high atmosphere, and some other biome that I'm going to land at, whichever that should happen to be. Okay, so this is the craft that I'm using for this. We have a mystery goo on either side of the Staputnik and the inline mystery goo from the Restock Plus mod, which gives us our 3 goo experiments. Also, I have the thermometer and the barometer, as well as RCS to give us some attitude control. Okay, so let's take a look at the mission script. Much as before, we're going to do a ascent with a pretty aggressive pitch over. We're going to set the minimum pitch altitude to 30,000 meters, which we're never going to get that high, but it's just to give us a aggressive pitch over. And we're headed 270 back behind us over the KSC towards the mountains. This is the standard science trigger I've been using all along. I've added 2 new ones here. This is going to be how we deal with the goo experiments. The parameters from Do Science, the first one is for repeatable experiments, and the second parameter is for the non-repeatable experiments. So the repeatable ones I'm not going to do with these; those are going to be handled with the regular one. But the non-repeatables I am using these for. So as soon as we get over 100 meters up, we're going to do the first goo experiment, and then at 18K we're going to do the second, and finally when landed or splashed we'll do the third. And we're also going to do a both science at that point and pick up anything that we have to do. We do have the recovery function added in, so when we abort out of the ascent script due to not going into orbit, we'll fall into the recovery, and I'm basically just using that to pop the parachutes rather than using staging. I made some changes to the ascent script, not a great deal. I found that I was putting the same code in for that RCS all over the place, and that's a sign that that should be a function, so I turned that into a function. It just takes 3 parameters, of which I'm only using 1. Back here, use RCS. This code is the same that I've had before. 3 parameters, the direction or the heading that needs to be maintained, a maximum and minimum degrees of difference. So what that says is if our deviation is 1 degree or more, turn on RCS, and we'll keep that on until the deviation is within 0.25 of a degree. These are as before, so that's what we have for that. Secondly, in the ascent script, for run mode 2, I previously had a PID controller that was maintaining a speed of 200 meters per second as I get through 8,000 meters. And that was kind of clunky and didn't work very well depending on what size of rockets you had and everything. So I've changed that now to just be a new function called set throttle TWR, which lets me set a maximum thrust to weight ratio. And that is also sitting up here in control right here. So we're going to use this with another new function called current gravity that we send in our ship's altitude down here. And this says for any altitude above any body mass, return the force of gravity. And we're going to apply that to our mass divided by thrust, and that's going to give us our thrust to weight ratio times our our target, and we're going to return whichever is lower, the throttle setting or 1. So we're not going to try to get a throttle setting greater than 1. And that will keep us at a maximum thrust to weight ratio of whatever it is we set here, and I've set that to 1.5. That should probably go into a, that shouldn't be a lock. It should be local. Not that it makes a great deal of difference, but that should be that. I think that probably needs to be up in the parameters, and I'll look at doing that. For run mode 3, previously I was using this PID controller only up to 60,000 meters, and then I was going to full blast on the throttle. I've now changed that to using the PID controller all the way until the orbit is established. And what I'm going to do with this now, when we get within 3% of the target apoapsis, that 60-second ETA is going to decrease down to 10 seconds. And what that's going to do is we're going to use our thrust to push out the periapsis. So the periapsis and the apoapsis get established at the same time, which is going to reduce the times when we do the whole coast to apoapsis thing, which I wasn't really happy with. So that is what has changed with those. So let's take a look at this launch, see if everything works. Bring this over here. All right, so what we should see, here's our mystery groove. It'll capture that as soon as we get above 100 meters. There we go. Get sample. We should see the thrust to weight ratio not rise above 1.5, and I'll do so in a much less herky-jerky manner than I've had before. Also see we're going to be veering over a little more aggressively than we have prior. See, the RCS is going to cycle on and off as needed to maintain our attitude. And we're heading off that direction. What do we got here? Minmus. You can see Minmus. That's because of the Distant Object Enhancement mod. I believe that's what it's called, Distant Object Enhancement. All right, we just had an RCS port failure. That's from the scrap. Oh, scrap. In fact, two of our RCS thrusters have become disabled, and that is not going to be that big a deal, but it would definitely on a longer mission that relies more on RCS once we get into space. Right now I have a gimbling engine, and that's going to take care of most of our gimbling, or our all right, we should be able to pick something up here. Good. The RCS is not really needed for this mission. All right. And oh, I didn't put any batteries on it. We should have enough, so we don't have enough electricity to transmit, but we still have enough to here we should get our second mystery goo here. All right. Is the RCS trying to keep our attitude under control when it doesn't quite understand where? There we go. Now we are in the abort situation, so now we'll fall into the recovery script. So all we're going to use this for is to control the parachute deployment, which happens at 5,000 meters. We didn't get very far. I was hoping to get to maybe the highlands. Maybe I need a more aggressive pitch over, and some more fuel, obviously. But my main goal was getting above 18K, so that was successful. We're gonna impact in less than 30 seconds, unless somebody pops a chute. So I think we picked up some. So we're going through that that science script, and every time before we do a science experiment, we check to see if we've already got data. So it's going to continually do that check. There we go. There's our parachute popped. Not very far away. Nice sunrise. All right, and now we should pick up these other two science experiments. Oh, program aborted. We ran out of power just before we got our other mystery goo. But as the scientists come to recover the craft, certainly we can do the mystery goo observation. Nope, we can't because we got no power. Doesn't matter. All right. Oh, recover. All right, so that brings us up to 51 signs, so that's going to get us the heat shield. There's our heat shield. Okay, so now we're ready for our orbit and recovery. Okay, so this is the craft that I'm going to attempt to get into orbit and return. I have the service module here, which I believe is a making history part. I've got two goo containers in here, two batteries, and the thermometer and barometer in here. Below that I have a heat shield and a decoupler, and that is this is our ascent stage or orbital stage and return stage, the whole thing right here. And then a booster stage down here, which I'm using the larger parts, the next larger parts. Again, those are a Making History edition, I believe. I have 4 non-gimbaling engines and 1 gimbaling engine on the booster with some fins to give us some rotational control. And then in the second stage, I have just 2 gimbaling engines. And we have our RCS thrusters put all the way at the top to provide maximum torque. So hopefully we're going to be able to control this thing. I am using a mod called Mandatory RCS, which nerfs reaction wheels. Not that I have any reaction wheels anyway, but it does make using RCS a must. Also, you can see down here we have surpassed the part limit for this, so we're not able to actually launch it until we do the upgrade. So I'm going to use my current fundage that I have here and upgrade the vehicle assembly building, raising our maximum parts to 255. I did swap the upgrade costs between these two, the launch pad and the vehicle assembly building, with a CustomBarnKit config that it keeps the cost the same. It just swaps which one you're going to upgrade first, because of all the small parts that are required for this. You're going to run into that part limit sooner than you're going to run into the 18-ton weight limit. So, and that's optional. You can disable that if you choose not to use it. And we just barely have enough money to build this craft. It's got less than or just over 1,000 left. We'll launch. Going to get our monthly budget here. 95,000. I think while that's up here, I have 263,000 in the big budget fund. That's for the next upgrade. I'm going to put, we're going to get quite a lot of budget coming up here. Half of that into the big project fund. Now, this is not added to your current money. This is what is your current money is going to be. So if you've already, so there's no, using monthly budgets, there's no benefit to saving money. I think I'm going to add, let's see, since we're going to get half of that, we're going to get about 90,000 or 85,000 in upfront funds. I'm going to start funding the research budget which takes some of your budget and puts it into getting some science points. It's not an efficient way to do it, but we don't really need a lot of that money just yet. And we'll close that and continue on. Can you see our vehicle safety rating is 6 average, with the worst being the heat shield. So I am going to recover the vessel and use this as a integration test. Okay, and you can see now that our rating is up to 8. Our worst part is now one of the battery packs. Before this takes off, let's take a look at the recovery script. First of all, our mission, same as before, we're just going to go in the ascent script and then fall into the recovery script. We're going to do science, both the repeatable and non-repeatable when we hit 70, over 70K, so when we're actually in space, and another one when we land or splash down. I've added another function. It's just called idle, and it lives in control, and it doesn't do anything. Where is idle? Right at the top. All it does is do telemetry. So after the craft is done with whatever we're doing, or in between phases or something where nothing particular is going on, we can use that idle to still get us telemetry. Okay, the recovery script. This is still kind of not really a work in progress, but it still has some issues to it that I'm trying to figure out. We do have a burn longitude here that we can use this to try to land in a particular spot. This is the start where we're going to do the deorbit burn. And I try to land at KSC. Let's see. Let's get rid of this. This is some remains of my fiddling, as I've been trying to get this thing to do what I want it. Whoops, went the wrong way. Uncomment. Uncomment. So this is latitude and longitude of KSC right here. And I've found through trial and error that get to here that burning at about 170, I believe, gets us close. And again, it depends on the mass of the craft, the altitude that you're starting at, and any number of things, probably your aerodynamics, and it's just kind of a trial and error. But I've tried to get it close to there. So what we're going to do in this, first of all, we're going to check to see if our altitude is less than 60,000. If it is, we're going to skip all of this burn latitude or burn longitude stuff and go directly into the reentry, because that's no longer pertinent. And when we do the abort out of the ascent script, that's what we're going to fall into. We're going to fall into run mode 4. Otherwise, we're going to set a Kerbal alarm clock alarm for our burn ETA, which is the number of degrees we have to burn times the seconds per degree. So. And that's the part I'm having trouble with. I'll have to still do a work on there. Okay, so run mode 1. If we are within 0.25 degrees of our burn longitude, we're going to go to run mode 2. Otherwise, if we're within 5 degrees, we're going to use RCS to try to get ourselves lined up to retrograde. Run mode 2 is just initiating deorbit burn. That's all that does. That actually, this bit right here could go right in here, since we don't use that for anything else. Let's do that. Watch the sausage being made, as it were. So we'll put this in here. And then run mode 2 doesn't really need to exist, but we'll renumber them. So run mode 2 is bye-bye. Actually, what we'll do is get rid of that. So that becomes run mode 3. Go back up here. That's going to change too. This gets fun when you renumber stuff. This will be run mode 3. This will be run mode 4. So run mode, this now needs to be run mode 3 there. Set to 2 when I'm 2 here. Set it to 3. When I'm at 3, set it to 4. When we're at 4, set it to 5. Okay, that looks good. Right, famous last words. Okay, so where were we? Once we initiate our deorbit burn, which is at our target longitude rather, we just have a check. If we are greater than 35,000 meters, we're going to check stage and set our throttle to using the set throttle that we'd done before, using our current periapsis and the target periapsis of 35,000, so that we can kind of have a gentle throttle down. Otherwise, we're done with our burn, and we're going to set the throttle to 0, wait 5 seconds, and stage anything left that we should have to stage that's greater than stage 1. So that means we're going to keep stage 0, which in this case is the parachutes. Now this also means that as you're designing scripts, you may have to design your ships to go along with whatever your scripts is, and verse versa. If you're for something like this, if you had your parachutes on a different stage, this wouldn't work, and you'd need to figure some way around that. So if you had your parachutes lower down for whatever reason, who knows? If we don't have anything left to stage, we set to run mode 5. We're still in retrograde. If our altitude is greater than 60,000, if our RCS was on, we'd turn it off. If our altitude is greater than 20,000, we're going to have RCS on, because we want to use that RCS to keep aligned with surface retrograde during the reentry. And that becomes important when you're depending on how your craft is shaped. I've tried to get this in with just the probe core before, without that service module below it that gives us that bell shape, and the aerodynamics just weren't working for me. And using DeadlyReentry, I could not get re-entered with that shape, even though I tried to use it with the RCS here. But I'm still leaving that in there. And if once we get below 5,000, or actually between 20,000 and 5,000, so at 20,000, we're going to unlock the steering, turn the RCS off, and just let the aerodynamics do their thing. Once we get to 5,000, we deploy the chutes using a function deploy chutes, which lives in systems down here, all the way at the bottom. Deploy chutes using function activate module. See, I had all of these functions here to do different things, and then I found that there were some things that I couldn't do that for, so I made this kind of this catch-all activate module. So I'm going to come back in and take all of these deploys, these different things, and have them all use activate module rather than having it all like this. This is the first one I did, activate module. So if I have a module called module parachute, I'm going to perform the action deploy chute. If I have the module real chute module, this is if you're using real chutes, which real chutes removes module parachute from all the parachutes, and then we'll arm parachute in that case. So this is how the deploy chutes works for either one. So that's systems. Back to recovery. We pop our chutes here, and then we land or splash. And if the radar altimeter says we're less than 50 feet, we're going to set our SAS on at this point to try to minimize any swaying and whatnot, so that we land as gently as we can. Now, SAS does not play well with kOS. kOS, when you use the lock heading to various things, SAS doesn't play well with that. So in general, you shouldn't use SAS. And then we fall through and do our normal stuff, set our throttle lock and heading lock. We're doing our lapse time and run mode. Print out a bunch of stuff here. I've got a bunch of other stuff being displayed on the console as I'm trying to figure out why my burn ETA is short. I can't figure that out, because it should be just the number of degrees times the orbital period divided by 360. That is seconds per degree times the number of degrees. And I'm pretty sure that the number of degrees lead is correct. But anywho, that's something I'm still fighting with, and I've been fighting with that for a week or so. But I thought I better get this episode done rather than sit there and bang my head against the wall. What do we got going up here? We can't see just yet. So hopefully this all works. Strategy availability change to boldly go. We've lost that because we lost some of our reputation as we went past the budget period. All right. Now, as we start getting these more advanced craft with more and more parts, doing the test launch is pretty much required in order to have the reliability you need to complete the mission. We have achievements for most complex and heaviest. That's again from the Space Age mod. So this now becomes our new. I do have the orbit and recovery. Good. Now we don't need to stay in orbit for any length of time, according to fulfill this contract. We just have to be in orbit and then get back out of orbit and land safely. So that's another requirement. So you can see our as we go through 8,000, you should see the with this much heavier craft than previously, you should see that's comes through much smoother than it did with the bid controller I was using prior. That is a lot of engine power down there, or not necessarily a lot of power, but that's 5 engines here. So nice glow there from restock. And here we go. After we break 8,000, we'll just pop up to maximum, and you can see that was a much less abrupt change. Now we still have to get past staging here, because when staging, sometimes the next stage can flip over if you haven't got it balanced just right, and I always forget to do that. So, but I do find that once I get going here a bit, it generally works. Here we go, and you see, oh, we flipped. Are we all right? Oh, come on, come on. The RCS is fighting. This might not work. Did we get back up? Between the gimbling engines and the RCS, we recovered, but we wasted a lot of delta V, and we did not have a great deal of delta V to spare. Now, I think it did that because it wasn't balanced correctly. That's something I'm going to need to look into. And it has to do with where your center of mass is compared to your center of drag, I believe. Could be also because of the Stay-Putnik up here. Okay, so now what we'll see, the time to periapsis, or to apoapsis rather, is going to go to 60, and we're going to lock onto that like we did prior. But we're not gonna disengage that. So here's our stage. Stage was destroyed. I have stage recovery installed, but I don't know with monthly budgets if that really matters if you recover a stage or not. Okay, so anyway, as I was saying, once our time to apoapsis gets to 60, we're just going to ride that up until we get to within 3% of the apoapsis, which is something like 72,250, something like that. And then that distance, that gap that we're holding, is going to slowly start bringing its way down to 10 seconds. And as we do that, the periapsis is going to be pushed out so that we can arrive at the periapsis and the apoapsis as close to the same time as possible. So we're almost down to a pitch of 0 now. I did change that from a flat number to being 80% of the target apoapsis, so that seems to be working pretty good. That was just set at like 60 60K before, which 60K I do believe is 80% of 775K, so that's why that worked out that way. Okay, throttling back as we decrease the drag as we're coming up, and we're keeping our apoapsis out to 1 minute. And as we get closer, we'll kick into that new bit of code. Now, the downside to doing it this way is when I was using the coast to apoapsis, I could use warp and go up the 2 minutes or what have you to get to the apoapsis. This way, that time is actually still all there. It's just now being spent pushing out the periapsis. See, now you can see the time to apoapsis is coming down. Periapsis is coming out real good now. And I think we're good on delta V. So now we're down to just a 1% of throttle now, pushing that periapsis out. So what this is actually going to do, rather than shooting for our apoapsis as I've always done before, this what our current apoapsis is actually what's going to be the periapsis. So I'm going to push the periapsis in effect to as close to the target as possible, and then when the periapsis pushes out and they swap, I'm going to have a very circular orbit. Okay, now here's where they're gonna swap very shortly now. Here we go. And now we'll push that out to 75. And you see we got a very circular orbit there, 0.001. Okay, so what do we got next? Next we have our current longitude is -16, and we have to burn at 90. Oh, I think I got something not right. Oh, should be 170. Well, I probably changed that. I think I changed that after I launched it, so we're not going to land anywhere near the KSC, but that's all right. Now we do have a Kerbal alarm clock that we can buzz ahead 23 minutes to. It's like, oh, just right into the sun. Perfect. So we'll have some. Okay, so this was supposed to get us just right up to like about 5 degrees before the target, and it's not. And I'm not entirely sure what I've got wrong yet. So if you'd happen to figure out what's wrong with my brain, let me know in the comments. I'm going to slowly use the warp, using small amounts of warp to get us up to about 85, so that there's time to get this thing aligned before we... All right, stop. Not 85, 95 there. So now we're using the RCS to try to align retrograde. We're doing reasonably well here. It's drifting over. And then when we get within 1/4 degree, it's going to fire the deburn, deorbit burn. So there's that RCS. There we go. And now that brings us down to a 35 apoapsis, and then we are going to stage the remainder and head on down. Now, technically, DeadlyReentry is not compatible with 1.6 that I'm using. It's for 1.5. It does work, but there's some things that doesn't work. What I use it for is it's very unforgiving in your reentry, which it's why I have this bell shape now, because I fought it many times trying to get in. Now, one thing that I have noticed is the ablative material doesn't decrease, so that's one of the incompatibilities with it. So it says right at the top when you use this, it'll give you a warning that says it's incompatible. So it's kind of use at your own risk. It's not a problem with DeadlyReentry. So I wonder if we're gonna land on this land or if we're going to get just beyond it. We have plenty of electricity. Now, if I start, I don't have a connection, so I'm not going to be transmitting any. One thing about using the recovery script for the parachutes is if the batteries run out or short out or something, if we don't have electrical power, the script stops and we don't deploy the chutes. So we have to have electrical power to deploy the chutes. Yeah, we're going to definitely go in the drink here. It's nice. What's over here? Minmus and Jewel. All right, we're doing start now. Once we get below, I believe it was 30K, I started the science script going again, in case I happen to travel over something that gives science. And that's again back on our normal 20-second loop. And then we're just gonna splash down in the water, assuming, well, depending on the speed we splash in. Now this RCS is going to stay on until we get below 20K, and then that is going to, we're going to unlock the steering and just free fall at that point. Okay, so now we're going to get, see if the parachute's going to pop. There we go. So, you know, changing my script at the last minute like that probably wasn't the smartest thing to do, but it's working out. Okay, now we will see if this thing floats. It does. Get all of our science. All right. And there we go. And now we've popped into the idle thing that gives us our telemetry back. Recover the vessel. All right, that got us a grand total of 19 science, 19.2. World's first milestone, we've returned from orbit for 4 reputation there. Got an achievement and 11 reputation and 4 science for completing the contract. And now To Boldly Go is available again. So what are we looking at for contracts now? SETI. I think we're about ready to do our RemoteTech with our dish network, or our satellite network. Oh, Kerbin-powered landing. That's what we got to do next. We have got to take a craft, take off, and land within 40 meters of the black monolith. We have to get to 500 meters. No parachute, wings, or nose cones, or air-breathing engines. So this is really fun. So we'll do this. That's going to be our next one. It's got to be. That's fun. Okay. Well, that worked out actually quite a bit better than I thought it would. So next time we'll look at the lander script, which is, it's pretty simple. It's just it's like the PID controller that I had used for the ascent script. It's the same thing, except instead of going at 200 meters per second, you know, we set it at 5 meters per second or what have you, or at 0, and then that lets you hover. So we'll look at that next time. So thanks for watching. See you next time.